An aviation billionaire ignored the mechanic's warning, then watched his empire crumble as she forced him to rebuild it from the ground up, one bolt at a time. Before we dive into the story, take a moment and tell us where you're watching from. It helps new viewers find stories like this. Day 1. The crash that never should have happened. William Carter stood alone in his private hangar at dawn, and for the first time in 18 years, the silence felt like an indictment. $800 million worth of grounded aircraft surrounded him, sleek, expensive, and deadly. The CA-7s sat in perfect rows, morning light gleaming off their composite wings, each one a monument to engineering excellence that had almost killed 43 people, including a 6-year-old girl who'd been visiting the demonstration flight with her father. The FAA order had arrived at 6 a.m., catastrophic stress fractures in the composite wing struts. Effective immediately, the entire fleet is grounded, no exceptions. His phone showed 247 unread messages, board members, investors, lawyers screaming about liability exposure. He'd stopped answering around the time the stock price dropped 47%. The news helicopters circled the building like vultures, but none of that compared to the moment FAA investigator Torres walked into his office and laid 3 items across his mahogany desk. First, a 6-page technical report, stamped "Ignarified" in red ink. Second, a photograph of a man in a wheelchair, tremors visible in his hands, even in the still image. Third, a manila folder labeled Flight 1842, Final Report. This technical report was submitted 3 months ago by Elizabeth Bishop, badge 2847, Torres said, her voice flat with the exhaustion of someone who'd stopped being surprised by negligence. She predicted the exact failure mode, down to the microscopic crack propagation pattern. You signed off on the demonstration flight 2 weeks later without addressing any of her concerns. William's hands trembled as he read. Every calculation was perfect. Every diagram showed precisely where the fractures would appear, the exact aircraft, the exact stress points, the exact sequence of failure. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, "These numbers don't lie. Please review before the demonstration flight." He remembered that meeting. 15 minutes between a board presentation and lunch with investors. His assistant's note, "Maintenance concern, engineering reviewed, found no issues." He'd never read past the summary. Torres pointed to the photograph. "James Chen, your former chief test pilot. The CA-7 prototype failed during initial testing 6 months before the public version. Emergency landing broke his spine in 3 places. He'll never walk again." She pushed the photograph closer. "Your legal team paid him $2 million to sign an NDA and disappear. Called it pilot error." Torres's eyes were cold. "Mr. Chen told you the vibration data looked wrong. You said your engineers had cleared it." William felt physically ill. "And this?" Torres opened the 3rd folder. "Is Flight 1842. Carter Regional Airlines, 15 years ago. Engine mount fatigue caused catastrophic failure at cruising altitude. 53 people died." She pulled out maintenance reports, warnings about the engines, recommendations for immediate inspection, all stamped with approval signatures. William's father's signature. Then, 3 years later, his own. The maintenance supervisor who filed these reports was Robert Bishop, Torres said quietly. He died in that crash. His daughter was 12 years old. The room tilted. "Elizabeth Bishop," William whispered. "The same mechanic whose report you ignored 3 months ago," Torres confirmed. "She's been working for you for 5 years. She knew exactly what would happen with the CA-7 because she's seen your company make the same choice twice. Once with her father, once with James Chen." Torres stood to leave. Here's your choice. We can shut you down permanently, or you can repair every aircraft under direct FAA supervision. And the only person we trust to supervise this is Bishop. She saw it coming when everyone else missed it, or ignored it. I'll pay her whatever she already refused. 3 times. Torres's expression held no sympathy. So we're making it a federal order. She supervises, or you lose your certification entirely. Those are the options. William opened his mouth to argue, to negotiate, to find the executive solution that would let him maintain control. Torres was already at the door. One more thing. Before you prepare your speech about learning and growing, you should know. Bishop's daughter Sophie is 17. She wants to be a commercial pilot. And she gets to watch you work under her mother's orders every single day. Torres paused. So when you meet them, maybe skip the part where you explain how you're a good person who made an honest mistake. Week 1. The Woman Who Knew. Elizabeth Bishop arrived at Carter Aerospace headquarters at exactly 8 a.m., carrying a battered toolbox and accompanied by a teenage girl with her mother's defiant chin. William had been rehearsing his opening statement for an hour. Humble, accountable, ready to learn. He extended his hand across the pristine conference table. Elizabeth ignored it. She set her toolbox on the polished surface with a thud that left a dent in the wood, then placed a photograph beside it. A pilot in uniform, smiling, his arm around a 6-year-old girl with braids. This is my father, Robert Bishop, Elizabeth said flatly. And this is me, 6 months before your company killed him. The teenage girl stepped forward. And I'm Sophie. I was 6 years old when your aircraft almost killed me 2 months ago. Mom had me visit the demonstration flight because she wanted me to see what happens when engineers actually care about safety. Her eyes were murder. Instead, I got to see what happens when they don't. William's carefully prepared statement died in his throat. Every structural analysis crosses my desk first, Elizabeth continued, pulling out documentation. Every test flight requires my written approval. You don't touch a wrench, approve a modification, or make a decision about airworthiness without me watching. She pulled out the original report he'd ignored, now preserved in a protective sleeve like evidence at a crime scene. We're starting by relearning everything you forgot. William tried to maintain executive authority. I have an engineering degree from MIT. I designed the CA-7's original. Your design almost killed 43 people, Elizabeth cut him off, including my daughter. When's the last time you actually built something with your hands? Not managed the building, not approved the design, actually fabricated a component yourself. The silence stretched. That's what I thought, she said. You've got 6 months to recertify this fleet. We start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind destroying. After they left, William sat alone in the conference room, staring at the photograph of Robert Bishop and his daughter. Through the window, he could see the grounded aircraft, beautiful, expensive, and deadly because he'd stopped being an engineer and started being a CEO who trusted other people to care as much as he did. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text contained a single line. Flight 1842 wasn't an accident. Ask about Jonathan Webb. A friend. Week 2. The Witness. William found James Chen in the hangar the next morning, wheelchair positioned near the prototype bay, watching with the intensity of someone who'd paid for Carter Aerospace's negligence with his body. James, William started. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, James interrupted, his voice eerily calm. I told you the vibration data looked wrong during pre-flight. You said your engineering team had cleared it. Told me I was being overcautious. He gestured to his paralyzed legs, to the tremors in his hands. Strut failed at 32,000 feet. Emergency landing broke my spine in 3 places, collapsed my lung, severed nerves in both hands. James met William's eyes. Your lawyers made me sign an NDA, said it was pilot error in the official report, paid me $2 million to disappear quietly. James rolled closer. But here's what they didn't know. Robert Bishop, Elizabeth's father, was my mentor. He taught me everything about aircraft safety when I was a rookie pilot, taught me to trust the maintenance crew, to listen when someone says the numbers don't add up. His voice cracked slightly. And your company killed him with the same negligence that paralyzed me. 15 years apart, same pattern. Warnings ignored, profits prioritized, people dead or broken. James straightened in his wheelchair. So yes, I'm going to watch you work under Elizabeth's orders. I'm going to watch you do the thing you should have done the first time. Shut up and listen to people who actually know what they're doing. And if you can't handle that, if your ego can't survive being subordinate to the daughter of a man your family killed, then maybe you'll understand what it felt like when you told me my 20 years of experience was just overcautious concern. That afternoon, a woman in her 30s approached William in the parking garage, sharp eyes, recording device visible in her jacket pocket. Dana Chen, investigative journalist, Seattle Tribune. She handed him a business card. I've been investigating Carter Aerospace for 6 months. I have evidence that Flight 1842 wasn't an accident. It was part of a systematic pattern of cost-cutting and safety violations. She showed him copies of internal memos. Your board member, Jonathan Webb, has been covering up safety complaints for over a decade. And I'm publishing in 72 hours unless you cooperate with my investigation. William stared at the documents, his own signature on maintenance deferrals, schedule compressions, cost reductions. All authorized by Webb, all signed by William without question. 72 hours, Mr. Carter. Then the world finds out exactly how many people your company has hurt. Month 1 to 2, the grinding. The work consumed everything. William worked beside Elizabeth 18 hours a day in the prototype bay, always 10 degrees too hot, filled with the smell of cutting fluid and metal shavings, the constant noise of machinery that made conversation impossible. She assigned him the most basic tasks, measuring tolerances with calipers, deburring edges until they passed inspection, preparing surfaces for composite bonding with a tension that made his hands cramp. His hands, soft from years behind a desk, developed calluses that cracked and bled. His back ached from hours bent over workbenches. Every night he went home exhausted, muscles screaming. Elizabeth never softened, never offered encouragement, just correction, delivered with the same flat precision as her calculations. That torque spec is wrong, redo it. You're rushing. Precision matters more than speed. I don't care what your MIT professor said, the physics is right here in the metal. Sophie watched from the corner, taking meticulous notes in a pilot's logbook, documenting every mistake, every correction, every moment William's incompetence showed through his credentials. The board called emergency meetings, investors demanded updates. William started showing up in coveralls, hands stained with oil, to explain the repair process in excruciating technical detail. You're destroying our brand image, his COO said during a tense conference call. We need you looking like a leader, not a mechanic. Good, William replied, surprising himself. Our brand was built on arrogance and shortcuts. Maybe it needs to be destroyed. The board went silent. His COO disconnected. William returned to the hangar where Elizabeth was waiting with another impossible task that would take 6 hours of focused work to complete. But then came the sabotage. During a routine systems test in month 2, a hydraulic line ruptured. Not a failure, but a clean cut, surgical and deliberate. Fluid sprayed across the cabin. Emergency systems engaged. The hangar door mechanisms froze, trapping them inside. Smoke began filling the compartment from a second ignition point near the fuel system. William and Elizabeth fought the fire together, she on the suppression system, he documenting everything with his phone, preserving evidence while battling flames. They worked in practiced synchronization, two people who'd learned to anticipate each other's movements through weeks of wordless collaboration. When the smoke cleared, they sat on the cabin floor, backs against opposite walls, both shaking with adrenaline. "Someone wants this project dead," Elizabeth said, voice hoarse. The investigation revealed the saboteur within 48 hours. Jonathan Webb, senior board member and William's father's oldest friend. The same man who'd been pushing to settle the James Chen case quietly, who'd argued against transparency, who'd fought the FAA oversight at every turn. The evidence was damning. Webb had hired a contractor to sabotage the testing, had been systematically covering up safety complaints for years to protect profit margins and stock prices. William's public reckoning threatened to expose decades of institutional negligence, not just his personal failures, but the entire corporate culture that rewarded hiding problems over fixing them. "If Carter admits fault," Webb had told another board member in a recorded conversation discovered during the investigation, "every victim from the past 15 years comes after us. We lose everything. Better to destroy the evidence and discredit the mechanic." But Dana Chen's investigation revealed something worse. Webb had been the one who'd pressured William's father to defer the maintenance that killed Robert Bishop. William's father had known Flight 1842 was unsafe. He'd approved the flight anyway to meet a quarterly deadline. Gadish 3. Sophie's Truth. One night, William found Sophie alone in the hangar archive room, surrounded by old maintenance reports, crying over a photograph of her grandfather in a pilot's uniform. "He promised to teach me to fly," Sophie whispered, not looking up. "I was 6. He said when I turned 16, he'd take me up in his Cessna and show me what it meant to be a real pilot." She traced the photograph with trembling fingers. "He died when I was 6. Your company's negligence killed him before he could keep that promise." She looked up, tears streaming. "So I learned anyway. I logged 847 hours because I swore I'd become the pilot he never got to see me be." She held up her pilot's logbook, pages filled with meticulous flight records, instructor signatures, rating certifications. "I have my commercial license, multi-engine rating, instrument certification. I'm qualified to fly anything in your fleet." Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. "Sophie wants to be the test pilot for the recertification flight," she said quietly. William stared. "Absolutely not. She's 17. If something goes wrong, it means you failed," Elizabeth said, her voice cold and final. "Again. And this time, you'll watch my daughter die the way I watched my father die because of your negligence." She stepped into the room. "Sophie flies the test flight, or we walk. Those are the terms." William looked between them, mother and daughter, both carrying the weight of Robert Bishop's death, both demanding the ultimate test of transformation. "Why?" he asked Sophie directly. "Why would you risk your life to test aircraft built by the company that killed your grandfather?" Sophie met his eyes with startling intensity. "Because if this aircraft is truly safe, if you've actually changed, if my mother's supervision actually worked, then this is how we prove it. Not with paperwork, not with speeches about accountability. With trust." She stood. "My grandfather believed that safety wasn't a cost. it was a responsibility. If you've actually learned that lesson, then the aircraft you build under my mother's supervision should be safe enough for his granddaughter to fly. She walked to the door, paused. But if you've just been performing transformation while the same negligence lives underneath, then I'd rather die exposing it than live knowing I let you keep killing people. Month 4. The second strike. Webb's second sabotage attempt was more sophisticated, corrupted software in the flight control system that would trigger catastrophic failure at altitude. Elizabeth's review caught it 48 hours before the scheduled test flight. She burst into William's office at 2 a.m., her hands shaking for the first time since he'd met her. If Sophie had flown this, Elizabeth's voice cracked, she'd be dead at 10,000 feet. Webb didn't just sabotage the aircraft, he tried to murder my daughter. They found Webb in the executive parking garage that night. The confrontation was brief and brutal. You tried to kill a 17-year-old girl to protect your stock options, William said, his voice deadly quiet. Webb smiled coldly. Your father would have done the same. He did do the same. Flight 1842 wasn't an accident, William. He knew those engines were failing. I showed him Robert Bishop's maintenance reports personally. He flew them anyway because the board demanded we meet our deadline. William felt the world tilt. Your father killed Elizabeth's father deliberately. Just like I'm protecting this company deliberately. It's what Carters do. We make hard choices that soft people can't understand. Webb straightened his tie. You were supposed to be like him. Instead, you're kneeling to some mechanic with a grudge and risking everything your father built for what? Redemption? There's no such thing. There's just power and the people too weak to use it. William's fist connected with Webb's jaw before conscious thought caught up. Webb went down hard, blood on his lips, smiling through broken teeth. There it is. You are your father's son after all. That night, William found Elizabeth and Sophie in the hangar archive room, surrounded by his father's personal journals. Dana Chen had provided them as part of her investigation. Flight 1842, William said quietly, sitting across from them. My father knew. Elizabeth looked up, her eyes haunted but unsurprised. I've known for 10 years. Dana Chen's investigation confirmed what I'd suspected. Your father had maintenance reports showing critical engine failure risk. Webb showed him the reports personally. He signed off anyway. She pushed a journal entry across the table, William's father's handwriting. Bishop is right about the engines, but we can't ground the fleet now. Board expects Q2 numbers. We'll address it after the quarter closes. The risk is manageable if we limit altitude restrictions. Flight 1842 had been scheduled for 35,000 feet. The engines had failed at 32,000. Why didn't you tell me? William asked. Because I wanted to see if you'd figure it out yourself, Elizabeth said. I wanted to see if you were capable of accepting the truth without someone forcing you to see it. If you could recognize your family's pattern of negligence without making excuses. She stood. Your father killed 53 people to meet a deadline. You nearly killed 43 people for the same reason. The question isn't what he did. It's whether you're going to keep being him. Sophie spoke, her voice steady. Mom gave you 6 months to prove you're different. I think you've got about 2 weeks left before I stop believing it. Month 5. The choice. Harrison Aviation's offer arrived via courier. Chief of Engineering, $5 million signing bonus, complete technical autonomy, clean slate. Elizabeth sat in her workshop at Riverside Airstrip with the contract for 2 days. Sophie found her there. Mom, why are you even considering staying? He doesn't deserve your help. It's not about what he deserves, Elizabeth said quietly. It's about whether he's actually changing or just performing transformation until the spotlight moves away. She stared at the contract. And I can't tell yet. That evening, William appeared at the workshop. He handed Elizabeth an envelope, not email, not text, but a handwritten letter on standard notebook paper, the same kind Robert Bishop had used for his maintenance reports. Elizabeth opened it slowly. Elizabeth, I found my father's journals. All of them. He knew Flight 1842 was unsafe. He wrote about it, about the choice between safety and profit, between integrity and success. He chose wrong, and he knew it was wrong when he made the choice. For 15 years, I've told myself I was different, that I built the safest aircraft in the world, that I honored my parents' deaths by never cutting corners. But I became him anyway. Not through malice, but through the same comfortable distance that let him ignore warnings, the same executive altitude that made maintenance reports feel beneath me, the same trust in hierarchy that said my engineering department knew better than the mechanic who actually touched the metal. I can't undo your father's death. I can't give Sophie back her grandfather. I can't restore James's ability to walk. All I can do is build systems that make it impossible for the next version of me to make the same choices. I know you're considering Harrison's offer. I know you should take it. You've proven your point. You've held me accountable. You don't owe me anything more. But if you stay, it won't be to save me. It will be to save the next mechanic who files a report no one reads, the next pilot who raises concerns no one hears, the next 6-year-old who loses their grandfather because someone chose profit over safety. Not for redemption, for prevention. I'm attaching the formal announcement. Effective immediately, you have binding veto authority over all safety decisions, reporting directly to the FAA, not to me. If you accept, I'm stepping down as CEO. You'll take my position. I'll stay as senior engineering advisor, reporting to you. Because the person who saw the failure before it happened should be the person with authority to prevent the next one. This isn't performance. This is surrender. William. Elizabeth sat with the letter for an hour. Sophie read it over her shoulder. Do you believe him? Sophie asked. I believe he means it right now, Elizabeth said. The question is whether he'll still mean it in 5 years, 10 years, when the spotlight fades and the board pressure returns and someone else's comfort makes it easy to ignore warnings again. She looked at the Harrison Aviation contract, then at William's letter. Your grandfather used to say, trust is built in drops and lost in buckets. Elizabeth folded the letter carefully. William's been adding drops for 6 months, but his family spilled buckets for 15 years. So what are you going to do? Elizabeth picked up her phone, dialed. Torres? Elizabeth Bishop. I'm accepting the CEO position at Carter Aerospace, under 2 conditions. Permanent FAA oversight with quarterly audits, and Sophie flies the recertification test. She hung up. Sophie stared. Mom? Your grandfather can't see you fly, but his legacy can. That's worth more than a clean slate. Month 6. The hearing. The FAA recertification hearing was packed. Dana Chen's expose had published 2 weeks earlier, 15 years of systematic safety violations, detailed in a 40,000-word investigation that had won immediate awards for journalism. Victims' families filled the gallery. James Chen sat in his wheelchair in the front row, Dana Chen beside him, taking notes. Sophie sat next to James, holding the photograph of her grandfather. William's lawyers had prepared a careful statement that protected him from criminal liability while expressing appropriate remorse. William set it aside. 6 months ago, Elizabeth Bishop submitted a technical report that would have prevented the CA-7's failure. I didn't ignore it because it was incorrect. It was completely accurate. I ignored it because reading maintenance reports felt beneath me, because I'd convinced myself that vision mattered more than execution, that leadership mattered more than competence. He pulled out the original report. 15 years before that, a maintenance supervisor named Robert Bishop, Elizabeth's father, submitted similar reports about engine mount fatigue on our regional fleet. My father, the CEO, saw those reports. Board member Jonathan Webb showed them to him personally. My father approved the flights anyway because the board demanded we meet our quarterly targets. William looked directly at Sophie. 53 people died in Flight 1842, including a pilot who was teaching his 6-year-old granddaughter to love flying. That granddaughter is 17 now. She's a licensed commercial pilot with 1,800 hours. She wants to be the test pilot for our recertification flight. The room erupted in murmurs. I'm going to let her fly it. Not because I'm reckless, but because if she's not safe in that cockpit, then no one is. And if I can't build an aircraft safe enough for Sophie Bishop, for Robert Bishop's granddaughter, then I have no business building aircraft at all. He presented formal documents to the FAA panel. I'm implementing the following changes. First, Elizabeth Bishop has final technical authority on all safety matters with binding veto power that supersedes any executive decision. Second, I'm establishing an independent safety board with authority to ground any aircraft and override any business pressure. Third, I'm funding a $100 million safety research initiative with findings available to the entire industry, including ARC experts. He paused. And fourth, I'm stepping down as CEO. Elizabeth Bishop will take my position. I'll remain as senior engineering advisor, reporting directly to her, because the person who saw the failure before it happened should be the person with authority to prevent the next one. Judge Harper reviewed the proposals for several minutes, then spoke. Mr. Carter, this commission has rarely seen such comprehensive acknowledgement of systemic failure. However, the test lies not in promises made under duress, but in systems built to survive executive turnover. She looked at Elizabeth. Ms. Bishop, you'll be CEO under permanent FAA oversight with quarterly safety audits. The test flight will proceed under our direct supervision. If Sophie Bishop wants to fly it, that's her decision, but she'll be fully informed of all risks. The gavel fell. Recertification hearing approved. Test flight scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Week 20, the test flight. Sophie stood in the hangar at dawn, staring at the fully recertified CA-7. Elizabeth approached in maintenance coveralls, carrying her father's old toolbox. You don't have to do this, Elizabeth said quietly. You've proven your point. You're brave enough. You don't need to actually fly it. Yes, I do, Sophie turned, eyes bright. Because this isn't just about proving William changed. It's about proving that Grandpa's death meant something. That his warnings, his maintenance reports, his dedication to safety, they weren't ignored forever. She touched the aircraft's fuselage. If this aircraft is truly safe, then Grandpa's work lives on through the systems Mom built from his lessons. But if it fails, if William's transformation was just performance, then at least I die exposing it before someone else's 6-year-old loses their grandfather. Elizabeth pulled her daughter close. Your grandfather would be so proud of you. And so terrified. Good, Sophie said. Fear keeps you sharp. Grandpa taught you that. You taught me. William met Sophie at the aircraft, James Chen was there too, standing with a walker now, after experimental surgery William had funded and Elizabeth had personally vetted. "Sophie," William said quietly, "I've built my entire career on aircraft. This is the safest thing I've ever touched. But you need to know, if you have any doubt, any hesitation, don't fly. We can find another test pilot." Sophie looked at him for a long moment. "Do you trust my mother's work?" "Completely." "Do you trust the systems she built?" "With my life." "Then I'm flying." Sophie climbed into the cockpit. "Because if you trust her work and she approved this aircraft, then it's safe. And that's the whole point." Sophie took the CA-7 through every certification parameter. William sat right seat, monitoring systems, his hands steady for the first time in months. At 10,000 feet, the altitude where the original design would have failed catastrophically, Sophie's voice came over the intercom. "Grandpa, this one's for you." She put the aircraft through maneuvers that would have destroyed the original design, stress tests that exceeded certification requirements. The modifications held perfectly. Every system Elizabeth had rebuilt responded flawlessly. When they landed, James Chen was waiting on the tarmac with his walker. Sophie climbed down and went straight to him. "I flew safe, James. Just like Grandpa taught you, and you taught Mom, and Mom taught me." James pulled her into a hug, both of them crying. Elizabeth stood apart, watching, and for the first time in 6 months, William saw something on her face that wasn't cold professional distance. It was relief. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of trust. 1 year later, the dedication. Carter Aerospace's new safety training center opened on the anniversary of Flight 1842. The building was named the Robert Bishop Center for Aviation Safety Excellence. Inside, an entire wall displayed photographs of every victim of Carter Aerospace's negligence over 15 years. 53 from Flight 1842, 16 from various maintenance-related incidents, and detailed accounts of near misses like James Chen's crash. Each photograph had a name, a story, a life remembered. At the dedication, Elizabeth stood at the podium, now CEO of Carter Aerospace, presiding over the safest operational record in the industry. "My father believed that safety wasn't a cost. There was a responsibility," she began. "For 15 years, I watched this company prove him wrong. Then, for 6 months, I watched one man learn to prove him right." She gestured to William in the audience, working in maintenance coveralls still, no executive title, no corner office. "William Carter isn't here today because he's redeemed. Redemption isn't something you achieve in 6 months or 6 years. It's something you practice every day through thousands of small choices to do the harder right thing instead of the easier wrong thing." She looked at Sophie, now 18 and enrolled in commercial flight school. "My daughter flies aircraft her grandfather never got to see her in. James Chen's daughter will grow up knowing her father's sacrifice led to systematic change. 53 people who died because of negligence will be remembered not as statistics, but as the reason we built something better." Elizabeth paused. "This center exists because my father's warnings were finally heard, because James Chen's injuries meant something, because Sophie was willing to risk everything to prove transformation was real, not performed." She looked directly at William. "And because one man chose to surrender his power rather than continue abusing it. That's not redemption. That's just the beginning of accountability." The applause was long and genuine. 5 years later. Sophie's first flight as a commercial airline captain was in a Carter CA-7X, the redesigned model that had become the industry standard for safety. William watched from the ground, working in the maintenance bay under Elizabeth's supervision, still learning, still accountable, still proving transformation through patient work instead of announcements. James Chen stood beside him, walking unassisted now, the experimental treatments having restored significant function. He'd become the chief safety instructor at the Bishop Center. "You know what your father never understood?" James said, watching Sophie's aircraft climb. "Safety isn't about being perfect. It's about building systems that catch you when you fail." He turned to William. "You failed, William, catastrophically. But you built the system that caught you. That's the difference between negligence and accountability." Dana Chen approached with her camera crew. She'd been documenting Carter Aerospace's transformation for 5 years now, turning it into a documentary series on corporate accountability. "William, one question for the film," she said. "5 years ago, you were a billionaire CEO. Now you work in maintenance under Elizabeth's supervision. Any regrets?" William looked up at Sophie's aircraft, then at the maintenance team working around him, people who now had direct authority to ground any aircraft, override any executive, prioritize safety over profit. "My only regret is that I needed to nearly kill 43 people before I learned what Robert Bishop tried to teach my father 15 years ago." He met Dana's camera directly. "The real question isn't whether I have regrets. It's whether the next CEO at the next company learns from this before people die." He returned to his work. Because transformation isn't about me. It's about building systems that make my transformation irrelevant. As Sophie's aircraft disappeared into the morning sky, Elizabeth appeared beside William, reviewing his maintenance log with the same exacting precision she'd shown 5 years ago. "Torque spec on the hydraulic fitting is off by 0.3%, she said. "Redo it." William nodded, grabbed his tools, started over. No argument, no resentment, just the quiet acceptance of someone who'd learned that competence wasn't about credentials or authority. It was about doing the work right, every time, because lives depended on it. Sophie's voice crackled over the maintenance bay radio.
Carter 747, climbing through flight level 300, all systems nominal.
James smiled. Robert would have loved hearing that. Elizabeth nodded, still watching William's work. "Yeah," she said quietly. "He would." And for the first time in 5 years, she almost smiled.